So short story, Brian, is I don't want to say that the extra credit syllogism quiz is a replacement for quiz 6. Um, and normally I don't break up the discussion forum and quizzes that sort of go together, at least numerically. So discussion 6, quiz 6, right? Um, in addition, if we look at our schedule, we are meant to write our second exam by the end of next week. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. Um, we're a little bit behind schedule. So what I might do is just make a note to folks that um, we should plan on maybe pushing back exam 2 from or pushing it forward, which however you think of the direction, but basically making it later, right? So let me write a note to self, and then I'll also post an announcement about this. I think it'll make more sense to move exam 2, which covers the two deductive systems that we study in chapter 3, to move exam 2 to the week of March 29th through April 4th. And then I'll also push exam 3 by a week. And that will give us just a little bit more time on that material. That said, you should know, I believe it's the case that all of our quizzes and exams, yes, have due dates, but remember the due date is not equivalent to the available until date or until the lock date, right? So the close date or the available until date is the date when an assessment is no longer available. If you need to access the assessment for some reason, then you'd want to chat with me about it. But I think I've got the quizzes and the exams set up to be open all semester. And my thinking behind that is I know that with people's lives so kind of, with people's lives upended in the way that has been the case, I don't want to be servile to a schedule. Obviously, we have to be respectful of the university schedule, when we start, when we end, but within that scope, I think we should have some flexibility. Now, I have made, as you know, a point of wanting for sure you to stay on track for discussions, because I need to have time to read you and give you feedback. But the quizzes and the exams, those are auto graded. You get feedback immediately. And so my thinking is we should have a lot more flexibility. So Brian, thank you for asking that question. So just as a quick recap, yes, so what we want to talk about today is finishing up with immediate inferences. We want to chat about syllogisms, and then work your extra credit if you can this weekend. Then, and your discussion forum 6. P.S. I'm behind reading discussion forum 5, but I'll be caught up today. So I apologize, I'm behind. And then next week, you'll work the reading quiz associated with the chapter 3, section 2 material. And then you'll work and then we'll next week we'll also push the exam 2. So like I said, I'll post an announcement about that, so that I hope the schedule is clear. And I think, for those of you with whom I've been in some regular contact, it's clear that I'm interested in working with you. So please, like, if you run into some trouble and you miss an assessment, don't feel like you are in some sort of, trouble, or that you have to be stressed about it. We'll work together to make sure that you get to get done what you need done. And so as a reminder, hold on just a sec. Let me find where did my chat window go? There it is. So you don't have to work the extra credit quiz, or the extra credit syllogism game. It is literally just extra credit. It's a point towards your overall score. Okay. So you don't have to take it, but it can't hurt you to do it. But I would wait to work the extra credit quiz, the syllogism quiz, until we've finished our work together today. So Brian, thanks again for that. I appreciate you asking the question. And I hope what I said wasn't convoluted. All right. So, as a reminder, I'm calling up our whiteboard. As a reminder, if as we're working you have questions, problems, confusions, please just speak up or send me a chat message, because I won't necessarily know that you have a question. Don't feel like you have to use the hand raise emoji. I'm not able to get every single tile on my display in addition to the whiteboard. So I may not see your hand raised, although I think Zoom gives an alert, but please just jump in. Also, as a reminder, you want, what I do each week when we meet is try to just highlight some basic features of concepts and skills that we're working on. Because we only meet once a week for 50 minutes, right? We don't have time to cover everything in detail. So you are responsible for, spending time throughout the week working on the material, coming to me with questions, problems, confusions. I want to hear from you, so that you get everything that you need to complete an assessment. Okay. All right. So remember last week we had finished talking about the traditional and modern squares of opposition. In other words, when we're given a claim, an E-claim, what inferences can we make? And what I mean by that question is this: what are the necessary inferences from an E-claim to either an A, an I, an O, right? And all around the square. Well, the answer to that question depends firstly on which version of the system, I should say, you are using. Are you in the traditional or Aristotelian version of the system, where you assume for each of the universal claims, you assume a member of the subject class exists, right? You assume existential import. Or are you in the modern version of the system, where you do not assume that a member of the subject class exists for each of the universal claims? If you're in the traditional system and you say, yes, I assume existential import, then you can make a number of inferences around the square of opposition. But remember, only one set of inferences does not require that you know the truth value of the originating claim. And that's your contradictories, right? So A and O and E and I are contradictory claims. When A is true, O is false. When O is false, A is true. When O is true, A is false, right? Same with the E and the I. When E is true, O is false. When sorry, I'm doing my usual, going too fast. Start again. Contradictory claims. When an A is true, the O is false. When the O is true, the A is false. When the E is true, the I is false. When the I is true, the E is false, right? In fact, you don't even need to know those values. You just know that A and O can't be true at the same time, can't be false at the same time. So the inference is necessarily to the opposite value. Same with E and I. Now, that's also the only set of inferences that are allowed on the modern interpretation. right? But if we're back in the traditional or Aristotelian interpretation, we have to know the truth values to make certain inferences, and sometimes knowing the truth value doesn't help us. So, for example, if a universal negative, if the E claim is false, the contrary, the A claim, is undetermined, right? And that's because contraries can both be false. They just can't both be true, right? So, knowing those values, knowing those truth values is imperative. The modern system says we're not interested in knowing what the truth values are. That gets us mired in kind of facts about the world that we're not interested in. We just want to know, based on the structure of the claim, what must be the case. Okay? So, remember we talked about the categorical systems of logic in terms of games, right? So knowing what the game pieces are, knowing what the rules of the game are, and then playing the game. And playing the game around, let's say, the square of opposition, right, is going to involve enlisting the rules associated with the traditional or Aristotelian system or the modern system. Okay. Then we started talking a bit about other so-called immediate inferences, right? So an immediate inference is simply an inference from one statement to another. So it's a two-statement or two-proposition inference. So square of opposition inferences are immediate inferences. And then there are additional immediate inferences. So remember, we said the following. Well, we started talking about the following. So immediate inferences. Right. We have square of opposition, traditional, oops, sorry, I can't spell. And then we have the additional immediate inferences, so-called additional immediate inferences. We've got conversion. That should be a 3. Contraposition and obversion. And these also we can talk about in terms of inferences that also are distinguished by the version of the system employed, that is traditional and modern, right? So remember we talked about the following. We said, okay, in what does conversion consist? Well, it consists in swapping the subject and predicate places of any claim type, right? So switch subject and predicate positions. Contraposition does the same thing as conversion, but there's an additional step. Switch subject and predicate positions and add the complement to each. Does anybody remember what the complement of a term means? It's the negation, right? So, reminder, let's suppose we have a universal affirmative claim, all SRP, right? When we convert the claim, we get all PRS. The conversion of an A claim does not yield an equivalent proposition to the original. All SRP is not logically equivalent to all PRS. So what contraposition does is it gives us a method of generating a claim that's equivalent to the original for the A proposition. And what else do we know? It mirrors in that way conversion for the E claim. So think about it this way. The A proposition converted is not equivalent to the original. The E proposition converted is equivalent to the original, whereby equivalent I mean is logically equivalent to the original, has the same logical structure. So since a converted A proposition is not equivalent to the original, we get contraposition, where a converted A proposition that then includes the addition of the complement, that is the contraposition of the A proposition, is equivalent to the original. Okay? So even though the language feels perhaps awkward to you when you're in the formality of the system, if you think about the language, you'll say, oh, no, I do use this very frequently. So let's think about it this way. The claim, all pit bulls are dogs, right? Converted is not equivalent to the original, right? So all pit bulls are dogs, all dogs are pit bulls. Doesn't say the same thing logically. But it is the case that all non-dogs are non-pit bulls. In other words, if it's not a dog, it's not going to be a pit bull. Right? What do we think? Notice the language that I used there. I went from the quantity and the quality, right, of the universal affirmative, and then adding the complement when I contrapose the claim to an if-then claim, because that's our sort of how we would more ordinarily use the contraposition. Okay. And then lastly, obversion involves changing the quality of the claim and then adding the complement to the predicate. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. We'll if we have time, we'll practice. But here's what I'd like to do. I'll save this whiteboard note, and then I want us to go back into our chapter 3 appendix chart. So bear with me. Okay, am I right to think, please give me some sort of sign. Am I right to think that everybody can see that I've shared our chapter 3 appendix? Yay, thank you, Jake. Okay, so as a reminder, our chapter 3 appendix is within the chapter 3 doc, but I pulled it out as a separate PDF just to make it more handy for you. All right, so if we go to, whoa, didn't mean to do, sorry, I meant to go to, no, I did go to the right place. Okay, so if we click on the obversion, conversion, contraposition set of charts, we get exactly what I just talked about. I talked about it, but I didn't write it out. I just wrote out the procedure, right? So here's a chart that tells you what you do to convert a universal affirmative, convert a universal negative, convert a particular affirmative, convert a particular negative. This is the procedure. Same with the contrapositive and the obverse, right? So there's what you do, there are the steps that you take, and then we get the evaluation. Remember what we're talking about here. When we're talking about evaluating an inference, we're talking about whether or not the inference is necessary. In the case of equivalences, which is to say, when we're talking about obversion, conversion, and contraposition, we're talking about whether or not the original statement, when obverted, yields a logically equivalent statement. Whether or not a converted statement is logically equivalent to the original. That's what we mean by a valid or necessary inference in this context. And so I give you a number of charts that tell you what we're talking about here, right? Including our Venn diagrams. So I'm going to stop the share. So as a note that I think is worth bearing in mind, what I give you in the appendix tells you what is the case and implicitly tells you why, right? It's not the case that it's a substitute for practicing, right, with the material. So you want to practice obverting a claim and seeing, let's say, by the Venn diagram or by the rules of obversion, if the resulting claim is logically equivalent to the original. Okay? Does this ring bells? Does this make sense? How are we doing? What do we think? I know the material that we're working on now is technical. Chapter 3, like I said, involves the study of 2 deductive systems of logic, one of which, the categorical logic material, is further, as we know, divided into 2 versions of the system, which is to say we've got the Aristotelian or traditional, where we assume that the universal claims have at least one member of the subject class, which is to say we assume existential import. The other version, the modern version, does not. And then we can ask after what inferences are necessary on the traditional and on the modern. Then we move into talking about additional immediate inferences, where what we're doing is manipulating the internal structure of a given proposition and asking if the resulting proposition is logically equivalent to the original. Because we're trying to exhaust all the possible ways that we can draw what are known as immediate inferences. Okay, so this is really, really good practice for us in a number of ways. I've likened it to, exercising certain muscles, right? The more we exercise it, the clearer certain aspects of our reading and thinking skills will be. You pre-law folks also, you want to study this stuff because it's going to help you a lot in your legal reasoning work. I mean, it helps all over the place, but I'm just thinking of one particular application. All right, so if we have some time today, we'll come back to talking about the immediate inferences. But now let's move into a discussion of the categorical syllogism. Okay, so whereas we have been studying immediate inferences, that is, 2 statement or 2 proposition inferences, we now move on to the study of 3 proposition inferences. And let me also alert you to or draw your attention to the following. When we look at an immediate inference, our focus is restricted to 2 terms. That is the subject term and the predicate term. We also study quantity and quality, but that's not the focus of what I want to share with you. Okay, so when we look at a categorical syllogism, we have 3 terms. Okay, so I want to call back to our Happy Cows commercial. Everybody remembers that, yeah? All. Do we do great cheese or great milk? I can't remember. I'll make it cheese this time.
I think we did cheese.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, I think so too. And by the way, like I've always loved this series of commercials. I think I've mentioned to you I'm from California, and so I would see these commercials on TV, right? And then I would use the commercials in class because hey, it's a great way to introduce syllogisms. But then part of me is thinking, part of me thinks that I should not use this set of examples anymore because when you think about the dairy industry and animal cruelty issues and their worries over that, I think, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But so forgive me. I mean, if you're vegetarian or vegan, or if you're concerned, as we all, I hope, should be about non-human animal welfare, I don't mean to make light of the plight of industrial farmed animals in using these examples. Okay, so all great cheeses are cheeses that come. Oh, gosh, you guys, I did it again. I always do this, don't I? I run out of room. Let me start again. Okay. All great cheeses are cheeses, and let's hope the cows really are happy. Cheeses that come from happy cows. All happy cows are cows that come from California. Now, before I move on to the conclusion, does everybody remember that the original commercial, taglines don't present or aren't presented in standard form? In other words, remember the commercial says, great cheese comes from happy cows. Happy cows come from California. There's no explicit quantity, right? There also is no explicit separation by means of a copula, a conjugation of the verb to be. There's no separation of the classes, the terms at issue. So we have, great cheese comes from happy cows. We don't get all great cheeses are cheeses that come from happy cows. That's a version of standard form, right? So what I've done is I put each of those sentences in standard form for the categorical proposition. Why? Because one of the practices that we want to be habitual for is this: take what we're given, put it in a standard form that we can easily, through which we can easily identify the parts. Then we're in a much better position to work on manipulations, to work on inferences, right? The better we are at that, then the easier it is to look at a sentence that's not in standard form and see what the quantity and quality are, see what the subject and predicate terms are, right? So this way of dealing with our ordinary English sentences, in other words, revealing the logical structure in a very specific way, is great practice for us to see kind of the forest for the trees, right? To see the structure of our logical structure of our language. And then the conclusion. So, but before the conclusion, let's go to this idea that I mentioned just a moment ago. 3 terms, right? Now, I'm putting this part in blue brackets because you'll notice that I underlined happy cows, but we have in the first sentence the cheeses that come from. I wanted to make a grammatical sentence, right? So I added that bit. But what we can easily do is drop that from the first sentence, right? So let's come back here. So we've got 1, 2. Notice that happy cows is repeated, and then 3, right? So our subject and predicate terms are still 2 in terms of the individual proposition, right? But when you put the 2 propositions together as premises in an argument, you now have a 3-term argument, okay? So let's go ahead and do the following to kind of clean up a little bit the visual clutter. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to replace term 1 with just G for great cheeses. Okay, so all G are H for happy cows. All H are C, things that come from California. Now, given that I've abstracted away from the original, is it clear to you that the H, which is a predicate of the first premise in the order given, is the subject term of the second premise? And is it also the case that the position of the H and the quantity and quality of each of the premises is such that the H relationship to G is transferred over to C? So does it make sense to say, therefore, what do we think? Now I want to try something and I want to know what you think. So give me some indication of what you're thinking. Remember when we diagram a single claim using the overlapping circles, using the Venns, right? We've got two circles because we've got two categories or two classes or two terms. Notice, however, that we have a third term here. So here are great cheese, things from California, happy cows. So let me tell you what we do when we're using the Venn diagram, and you tell me if this seems reasonable to you, if this makes sense. Please note, I think we've already talked about this, namely that not everybody loves Venn diagrams, but getting comfortable with the Venn is really, really important. We want to get it, okay? I'm going to use the modern interpretation of the universal. Here's what we do when we determine if a syllogism, a categorical syllogism, is valid. We're going to diagram the premises only. So we're going to diagram the GH relationship. All great cheese is cheese that comes from happy cows. So here's the area, right, that we need to diagram. All the G's, if there are any, are dumped into the H area where there's overlap. Give me a sign. How many people say, yes, Mia, I see this? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a text message. Give me a verbal. Thank you, Jake, Madison, Amanda. Good. Right, good. Okay. As a reminder, you folks who are giving the thumbs up, thank you. But also, we talked last week about study groups. I hope that folks who are really comfortable with the material are in study groups, and those study groups include people who aren't comfortable with the material, because you're going to help each other. The folks who get it, the folks who are really comfortable with it, are going to help their own understanding and their skill set by talking about it with folks who are having trouble. And the folks who are having trouble are going to hear and practice with hear from and practice with those who are comfortable. And it's another voice, right? It's not just mine yapping at you. So I hope that you're doing that and that it's helpful. All right, so we've diagrammed the first premise. I'll use a different color for the second premise. All H are C. So now here is the area. Notice I'm ignoring G, but that's because G is not relevant to the HC area, right? All H are C. Okay, check mark. Now we're done. So when you draw a Venn diagram to test a categorical syllogism for validity, you always only diagram your premises. Why? Well, remember what we're asking when we ask if an argument is valid. We ask if the premises entail the conclusion. We ask if the conclusion is extracted from the premises. We ask if the premises force us to accept the conclusion just by dint of logical structure. Well, now we ask the question, is it the case that in diagramming the premises, we have diagrammed the conclusion? Well, let's look at what the conclusion is saying. The conclusion is saying all GRC. So is it the case that the entirety of the G class is dumped into the C class? Yes, it is. Here's where all the G's, if they exist, right, will be. They're in that area of overlap between G and C. Now you might say, but Mia, look at this green part here, right? See where I'm making a little mark? You might say that's been shaded, so there can't be anything there. And my response to that is, that's fine, because, let me go back here, and I didn't mean to erase that part. That's fine because it still is the case that whatever G's there are, they're dumped into the GC overlap area. Okay, now hold on, I'm going to generate another whiteboard. I'm going to give us a new whiteboard. Now let's work the same argument by way of the traditional interpretation of the categorical claim. So we said all G are H, all H are C. Oh, sorry. So all G are C. Okay, here's our H. G and C. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to do the same thing we did before, except this time we assume existential import. So first, all G are H. What are we talking about? We're talking about this area, right? All the G's are dumped into the H category. Now, here's something interesting for you to think about. The area of overlap is here. When we assume existential import, we put an X in that area of overlap, right? But notice we've got this line here. Is it the case that the G's that are H's, right, are outside of C or inside of C? Well, we don't know yet, right? We haven't finished diagramming. So here's what we're going to do. For right now, we're going to put the X right here on the line. Okay? Now let's diagram all HRC. Here's the area that we want to deal with, all HRC. Oh, notice what we've got to do now. If it's not the case that you can put an X in a shaded area because there's no place for that X, guess where that X has to go? It's got to go right here. Right? It could also go right here, right, for the HC overlap. But let's go back to the GH area. The GHX has to be right here, right? The HX could be here, could be here. We could put it put this second X on the line. But notice that we've got to have an X in that area of overlap. Here again, the diagram tells us that the conclusion shows up. All the G's are C's. And we can see by way of the X in the area of overlap between G and C that in fact that's exactly where they are. There's at least one there. What do we think? How are we doing? All right, I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to stop the share. Okay. We are not only looking at the categorical syllogism evaluation in terms of the diagramming of the then, we also have what are known as rules of the syllogism. So that is the rules of the syllogism are another way to evaluate the argument. If you have questions about that, let me know. Somebody had asked, and I can't remember, forgive me offhand, who it was, about videos that might help with this stuff. I realize that, or I recognize that, I've given you a lot of videos. I've tried to connect each of the videos with the material that we're studying by way of, where the videos appear in terms of here are videos for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, right? But it should also be the case that the videos, the description of the videos should help a bit. That said, if you want to know about a specific video, in terms of whether or not it's associated with a specific skill or set of concepts, let me know and I can provide you that information. So that whoever it was who wrote back to me, I still have to write back to that person, but I figure I'll tell everybody all at once that I think it's the case that I offer you descriptions of each of the videos, what's contained in the videos. But if you want, if you feel like that's not sufficient, you want more information, let me know. But so I hope the videos also help. Again, because I recognize that, reading the text is not always, it's not the way that everybody learns. Some people learn by, for example, watching things, watching the process. Don't forget too, lots and lots of practice will help. Okay. Questions, problems, confusions. Is there anything you want to get to before we sign off? All right, so as a reminder, I'm here not just during office hours, I'm around. Okay, so if you want to meet to chat about the material, please let me know and we'll set up a time that works. Obviously, drop into office hours whenever you would like. There's no appointment necessary. And of course, we can converse via email, whatever works for you. So have a wonderful weekend. If I don't chat with you before the weekend, and I will see you next week. I will also I'll make that announcement, right, about the pushing of the exams. Thanks, everybody.